Hello, everyone. This is Yasmin West. I'm here with my husband, Robert West, on behalf of Radio Bob. And we are here today with Jim Burgoon. And I had a coffee chat with him. I met him in the Unleash You Now community. And I had a coffee chat with him. He does a lot of different types of coaching. He's done it for many years. He's very well qualified. But there was one particular training that he's certified in, and that is the DISC communication profiles. And I was like, I got to talk to this guy because that was something that I actually did it with a former employer. We actually did it twice while I was employed there. And for myself, it was absolutely life-changing. It made me so much less frustrated in my communications with my coworkers because I could understand a little bit more about their communication style and their makeup and not take things so personally. So I'm going to go ahead and let Jim introduce himself and we'll get started. We'll keep this nice and fun and light, informative, but also might well poke fun at each other because we're all different, all three of us. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate you. I appreciate the listeners taking the time out of their days to listen. So, for all you guys have heard, my name is Jim Burgoon. I am certified leadership coach in John Maxwell team. I'm also a certified DISC consultant through John Maxwell team, which is a subsidiary of People Keys. Been doing that for almost 2 decades. Been actually certified for about 5 or 6 years, but doing leadership development in some capacity for probably the last two decades, most likely. I have never really counted it, but I know it's pushing that. Currently, I am doing coaching and consulting in these areas. I do have a podcast that I just launched called Grace in the Grind, and I am launching a whole new brand about grace-driven leadership.
Give us an example of a few of your tools and then how this particular tool fits into your box and where you apply it to.
Sure, absolutely. So, as a disc consultant, what we do is we oftentimes will have a conversation, kind of get a feel, and then we'll run people through an assessment, what they want to call it. They call it an indicator because they don't like the term assessment or anything, but it's really what it is. But it's an indicator, and what it is it's basically takes you about 10 minutes. It's a group of maybe 20 questions, and then you get a 30-page professional, uh, you know printout that says, here's your disc, here's your growth areas, your weakness areas, and it really goes in depth by the breakdown of who you are based on your personality type, based on your answers. And so this is the first and foremost tool we use because here's the deal. In any types of coaching situation or any type of consulting or just even conversations, it's good to know people's wiring so I know how to speak to them, because in disc world we call it blending, because like I know you guys are a little different than my personality core, and we'll get into that I'm sure soon. And so I blend, which means I'll come into your world to speak in your way that you understand, in order for you to bring it back into the middle with me to create some sort of goals or some sort of like progress. And so to benefit the listener. So the dispersed personality profile is based on 4 letters, which is the 4 quadrants of personality, DISC. D are your drivers, they're your hard hitters, they're going forward, they're the kind of guys that are say, lead me, follower, or get out of my way. High results driven. They're really asking, for that results, for that. What are we doing? Like, what's going on? Your eyes, I'm an IS, but your eyes are more your influencers. That's the word that's associated with it. Not to be confused with the social media influencers, because that's a whole other conversation in there we can get into. But like, for eyes, we love attention. We love when we come into a room, we're energetic. We want to meet everybody in the room. We want people to kind of shift focus to us and follow the energies and things like that. Our core question is always who's going to be there. S's are your steadies. They're going to be the people who come in and they're going to be like the one-on-one people. They're going to be very counselory type. They'll probably hug you 16 times and tell you it's going to be okay. Because it's very thing. They're oftentimes the S's are most afraid of conflict and change, so they're really driven to safety. And you always can tell an S because they're asking, how do we do it? Like they want to know the details on how do we do it because it brings safety. And then your C's are your conscientious person, who is your high detailed. You probably have to write a dissertation in order to change their mind. This is how detail oriented they are and how deep they get into it. So if you want to argue with a C, first and foremost, good luck. Secondly, bring your A game, especially if you're not a C trying to come and have an argument or a discussion with a C, because you have to bring all of your proof, all the backup proof to your proof, and any proof that they have based on the questions that they have, you have to have proof with you as well. So therefore, they're asking the really question of why. So I just wanted to break that down because I didn't want to throw around a lot of letters and conversation without the listener kind of saying, hey, what does that mean? So that's a quick
Right.
overview of what that means so that there's context for the rest of our conversation.
Yeah, and you just nailed me to a T.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Although I've learned after going through the training, I've learned to kind of step a little bit away from that just because it's easier to interact with other people if you can be a little bit more flexible.
Right. Well, it's so funny. Even say I've stepped a little way away from that, and I'm gonna say, yeah, no, you haven't. Ultimately, the way it works a lot of times in C's was you've convinced yourself you've stepped away,
Ah,
but you're only acquiescing yourself to make sure that you're not having a high level of conflict because you know something's going to get said to you because you know the patterns. So you still desire all the stuff, but you've kind of let go of the need to get it because you realize the D isn't going to give it to you. So you just relegated to being like, hey, I'm not going to get this from this person. So what can I get? And then you go from there. And that's true. There's true to that. Like Bob, you're a D. We talked about that right before the show started. DC, like a guy like you wants to be in charge. Like you are somebody who like will literally die under people if your wife was in charge of something and you were under her because of her need for details. So D's are really in that place of I want to be the decision maker. That's just a natural proclivity and driven. But you're talking about the boat. I think it's funny if we were on a boat and we just who would be in charge, the D would make the natural leader. They're naturally drawn leaders, so therefore, yeah, quick decisions, things like that. The I's would make decent leaders because we can get charisma going and get people on the same team, and we have a great ability to get everybody moving in the right direction together, right? We're team oriented, we're group oriented. However, an I has the propensity to walk in and go, oh look, let's do this, great, oh squirrel, and then find somewhere else. Your S's would be too afraid to make the decision because they would be afraid the decision would bring conflict. What if somebody disagreed with them? What if somebody got hurt? And then, oh, what about the safety of it? So the S's would sit in the paralysis of the analysis because they don't want to be in conflict. They don't want to be challenging anybody. They don't want to tell people what to do because God forbid they make a decision and they'll sit and ruminate on it and the ramifications of how everybody feels in the midst of it. And then your C's will pull out the journals and pull out the books and get everybody's thoughts and ask questions. And 16 hours later, you're past the first point. Yeah, you need, on a boat specifically. I'm a prior Coast Guard guy. I was on a boat for 2 years. Yeah, on a boat, I want a captain who is going to be like, I need this, and this done. Absolutely.
Your
Yeah.
your D's will give up standing as long as everything above them is okay.
Yes.
You will give up your standing. You're like, okay, the dudes above me, they're all right. But then when they turn to you and ask you a question and say, well, what do you think about this? The first thing that D wants to know is, okay, what's going to happen after I open my mouth? Right?
Yep.
Because I want to know my exact position from this moment forward before I tell you exactly what I think you should do. Because
Right.
I know that I'm not going to give up any of that power the moment I open my mouth. And
Right.
so we'll determine that. And
Absolutely.
yeah, makes your D even more dangerous, but that's what you gotta have.
Well, it's I like to move away from the dangerous pot because what you're really describing is two things, right? Number one, these are highly attracted to status.
Right.
And it's whatever that status is, I want, if it means I've got more status than I have now, right? Because status is respect. And the D's number one thing is competence. If you're not competent, a D will find out, and a D will be like, "Yeah, you ain't on my team." That's competence. but it's also that status. Like if you're in sales, so I do sales, obviously, so do you guys. If you go to a D and say, hey, here's the bottom line, and then you want to show like all the high profile people that's been on your radio show, and what'll happen is the D will go, oh, that person and that person has been on there, I'll go on too. It's a
Right.
status thing. And what the number one thing that a D is afraid of is being taken advantage of. So what you're talking about is I don't want to share my what I think for two reasons. Will it decrease my status, and will it give you an opportunity to take advantage of me? Your fear and your desire rolled into one is why a D may be silent until they're frustrated and said, "You're an idiot. This is what you need to do."
Process.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the big thing is disc is not anything that's mystical, magical. What disc really does, it dives into behavior and communication based on patterns. Your tells, as you just said. And that's really what it comes down to. Based on patterns, this is most likely what's going to happen. Because, as a side note, in personality studies, the three big ones, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, and disc, personality can shift. Like you can shift, and a D can be a C in certain circumstances, or a D, depending upon what they grew up with. Did they grow up with trauma? Could have shifted from an I to a D based on that. So there's a lot of things. So what they say, what the experts say is that um, personality is fluid, but there is a series of hardcore, like you said, tells or patterns that show me based on our assessments and our conversations what you're going to behave like based on certain circumstances and situations and your communication style. And that's why I love disc. Like I do Enneagram and all that stuff as more of a personal project, hobby kind of thing. Like I love Enneagram, but Enneagram tells motivation. Half the time I don't really care about your motivation. I want to know how I can talk to you and what you're going to react with, because we're in sales, we're in education, we're in these things. I'm great that your motivation thing is great. I love Enneagram. Myers-Briggs, that's personality studies. That's really getting in depth of your external, internal world, extrovert, introvert, sensory perceiver. That's those kind of things where DISC is specifically how you behave and how you communicate based on the patterns of your thinking and your life up to now. For high.
Yeah.
Yep.
So maybe like for people that don't have access to, a trainer, or they don't have an employer that's going to bring someone in to actually do this training, what are some good indicators that might people might be able to spot where someone else is at?
So are you talking like indicators as in like tells based on what, just conversations?
Yeah, so kind of like how they interact. I
Okay.
know during our training they said like the D's and the I's tend to be a little bit more fast paced.
Yes.
And so just maybe some little tips there where you
Yeah,
can kind of
absolutely.
get an idea who you're dealing with.
Oh, absolutely. So when I do my sales trainings, I do this where I can say, hey, listen, in a matter of a minute or two, you could probably get a good indication on where somebody's at. So like if you're talking with a D, number one, they're generally going to be quieter or they're going to be strict to the point. Like there's no extra stories, there's no extra fluff. It's here's what it is, here's what I think. That's it. Because it's a time thing. It's like don't waste my time. So whenever you come up to there and your eye, not your eyes, but like your SCs might be like, man, that was a jerk, that guy. However, it may have just been a D, and your personality is a passive because D's and I's are aggressive and S's and C's are passive. So it just may be that. So if you're going to interact and you're interacting with somebody, and like I said, they're direct, they're strict, they're right to the point. It's not meant to hurt your feelings. That's just how they do it. I make a joke. I said, anytime I have a conversation with D in the 20 years I've been doing this, I think the longest conversation I had was 15 minutes. And I'm talking my best friend, the guy who led me to Christ. Like this guy is really like huge in my life. Most of our conversations are about 15 minutes, and everything else he says, just text me. You know what I'm saying? Like if it can't be through a text, like if call me, but if it can, just text me. Like that's how you know you're dealing with a lot of D's. Your eyes, we talk a lot. So if you find somebody and you ask them like a question, like eyes tell on themselves all the time. Like if you're a salesperson, you're coming in, hey, I've got this thing. What is something you need? You know, just start telling everything of desires and this, and it goes in this story, and aunt, little uncle's brother, sister's dog is doing this and this. Like we are super like in an animated, very relational style. We want excitement, we want attention, but we also want to be heard. So we're going to talk a lot. And so a lot of times eyes will talk about themselves the most. So if you see somebody who's like more of an immature eye, all they're going to talk about is what they've done, what they've accomplished, what they're doing, and there's no room for anybody else or you in that conversation. More mature eyes will be more let the conversation is about the stories themselves, not so much about themselves in the story, but how we all relate in the story. Your S's are going to be your shy ones, so they make be like more squatty and more their energy is going to be lower. They're going to be maybe questioned, but there's going to be a lot of shyness around those guys. A little bit on the quiet side, but they're also going to be the most loving. These are the people that if you go crying, they're going to cry with you. If you're going to go needing a hug, they're going to be the ones to hug you. They're the ones that you find like that are oftentimes your counselors and some of the best counselors because they listen. These are the best listeners of all the group. Your C's, just be prepared for lots of questions. Like if you ask a question, they're going to ask a question based on your question, based on your question,
Yeah.
and they're going to be technical questions. And S ask a lot of questions, but they're trying to figure out how we're going to do this. A C ask a lot of questions, but everything's technical. Like you may get like depends on like what you're selling or what you're doing, but you may get like, well, what's the science behind this? What? I don't know. It's just, they're technical questions. So your C's are going to be highly technical. They're going to be very much give me the information I need. And not only that, give me all the information. Another tell, my wife is a CS. My wife is a very high C. And one of the years we've been married, we've been together 25, been married 20. And one of the things I've had to help her or to train her in, and now all you guys out there who are like, you train your wife, my wife has trained me to speak to her in a way she needed, just like I've had to train her to speak to me. C's will do the thing where they'll tell all the details about the story without telling the story. So I will, yeah, I see you shaking your head like you know it. So like when my wife goes to tell me something, I say time, and here's a little tip for you, sir. Time, what are you trying to say? Give me the basic straight thing. And my wife will go, okay, here's what I'm trying to say. I said, okay, now you can tell all of your other details on your details and your stories on your stories, because my wife will start with the stories and the details that I'm sitting here like 20 minutes in. I'm like, what are you trying to tell me? And then I feel bad because if we don't figure out what you're trying to say, we've checked out. We may be looking at you, but we're gone. I promise you, we gone.
As I explained to my wife very early on a boat trip, which was like our second date, if little Timmy has fallen down the well, I would like to know that bit of information first,
Right,
just in case little Timmy is still in the well.
right. That's exactly
I
it.
don't want to know about the dog and the rabbit, him chasing through the field on his birthday in his little blue uniform.
Right.
We just don't have time for
I
that.
don't care what he's wearing. Is he drowning?
And can you give us a brief overview of the other things people might find by getting in contact with you and how they get in contact with you? And let's see what else might spark some interest, because you've got a captive audience that are listening to you for at least a few more minutes. So
Nice. So yeah, so tools in the tool belt. There's plenty that I can draw upon. I draw upon a very big background. I was a pastor for 15 years. I was a school teacher for 10, specifically working with special needs students. So each one of those skill sets is a set of tools. Like for instance, in the pastoring, like there's pastoral counseling. So I've done some counseling. There is also being a life coach, because as a pastor, you just do life and everything comes back to that life. So there's that. Special needs. We've done a lot of things. So like I can help people who may be having struggles in relationships with their ADHD child or their autistic child. My wife is diagnosed with four mental illnesses, and we've been together 25 years, so we've had to navigate that. So really everything that I do always comes back to relationships. Disc is a tool about relationships. the counseling I may do. And I'm not a licensed counselor, so I will, if it's something that I can't handle, I don't counsel that way. I will refer you to somebody I trust. But when I do like biblical counseling or biblical consulting or something along those lines, life coaching, we'll call it life coaching. I like to call myself a life architect. We'll go and say, like, here's like 4 steps on how to do this, this, and this. Let's get here. We do those things, and and it all comes back to relationships because it's about the relationship. Disc is about how I relate to myself and the world. The biblical life coaching is about how you're going to own yourself and relate to your world. The same with working with students with special needs. How do they relate to the world and how can I relate to them? And of course, married with children with mental illness. How can we all relate to one another and do the purposes that God has put in our hearts to do in this world? B, to make sure that we're all not crazy and burnt out at the end of at the end of our life, and really getting into the fact of, and this is, I said all that to say this: you have anchors and blocks holding you back. My job is to help you remove those anchors and blocks so that you can fly. It's really what it comes down.
And people get a hold of you how and for what normal reasons?
So anywhere on all the socials, I'm really more into, I'm TikTok and YouTube and Facebook, but I'm on all the socials at Lead with Jim. That's just the moniker I use, Lead with Jim. I also have a podcast I just started, Grace in the Grind. You can find it on any one of your podcast services, Apple, Spotify. Just look up Grace in the Grind with Jim Burgoon. You'll find me there as well. And then what was your second question? That just slipped my mind.
Do you have a website? What services do you provide at that website?
So I do not have a website yet. I am working on getting that up. I finally, after 10 years, I'm so excited. I've been working on trying to get jimburgoon.com and I finally got it. Like after 10 years, I was like, the other dude wasn't even named Jim Burgoon. I was like, why are you holding on to this website? Sure enough, I went up there yesterday and I now have it. And so in the next few weeks, I will have a website. And generally, what I do is just contact me right now through any socials. And when this website's up, you can contact me through that. However, what it's really going to be is an intake, kind of a conversation. What do you need? Like, what's the problem? And then we're going to determine if your problem is something I can solve or can I refer you to somebody else who's going to solve it.